Oh, good. So, a nice simple start. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths, and just think very, as I say, simply. Nothing fancy. Just three things really. I think it can come down to the first instance. Obviously, it can get more complex, but it's about your relationship with the pull of gravity and the ground beneath you. If we can find a way of standing and moving in relation to that, well, powerful, overwhelming force, really, that is with us all the time, then it has much to teach us about how we respond to any kind of pressure that is on us. In the first instance, it's about just recognizing what is happening and making what moves you can in the first instance to sort of neutralize the effect of the force, whatever it is. So in terms of gravity, we need to think about our posture. We want to think about allowing the force to move through us rather than impacting somewhere in our body. Commonly, those kind of areas, knees, hips, back and shoulders, are the areas of the body that often directly are affected by the pull of gravity. And we want to think about how we're going to move to maintain that alignment with the force. So once we've dealt with that very simple model, we then have a slightly more difficult task ahead of us, I suppose you could say, which is to try and move with those qualities. So this starts to question how we're moving. And of course, we've picked up in our lives for all sorts of reasons any number of habits of movement. My favorite example of that was many years ago. I was teaching a class and I went into great detail of posture, shoulders to hips, knees to the balls of the feet, and the whole thing, which we will look at in a few moments. At the end of the class, this woman came up to me. Fortunately, she was smiling, but she came up and she just stood like this, and she said, "It's all very well," she said, "but I've had 3 babies." So the implication was very clear. She spent a good part of her life with a child on a hip, probably the same hip, and probably another couple of kids running around her feet. And it's a point well taken. The things that we do, our work, our pastimes, our lifestyle, have an effect on our bodies. If you spend a long time, I don't know, riding a racing bike, then your body would have adapted in various ways to that posture. Other things that can affect, of course, are short-term, long-term illness. If you had an injury maybe 20, 30 years ago, maybe you hurt a leg or something like that, and so you spent a little while favouring the other leg. All sorts of little changes in the body happen in those circumstances, and if we don't recognise them straight away, they get embedded in our body. And obviously, if you've got some kind of condition that continually affects your posture in one way or another, and the things that you can do and how you do them, that's going to be an ongoing thing. So with Tai Chi, it's important to realize that it aims very high in terms of what we want to achieve. That isn't necessarily a suggestion that that's what we have to be doing right now, nor that we're somehow failing if we don't meet those standards. Nothing is static. We're fortunate these days that we can see film of some of the old Chinese masters from early 20th century, and in some cases we can see the film with the same people through the years, and obviously that's something that is becoming more and more capable of. But quite often their form will change. In fact, I would say that in a way their form should have changed, because part of what we're doing is moving with the environment around us, the circumstances, both internal and external, that we live with. We go through changes as we grow older. And the simple fact is that if you change one thing, so if you adjust a hip or you adjust a shoulder, there's going to be ramifications for that through the whole of your body. Changes should be made carefully and gently, with an awareness of what's happening within your body for you right now. Nothing should be strained. Nothing should involve a gripping, a tightening. So we learn gradually to distinguish between different states in the body. And it's useful to think in terms of muscles to begin with, but it really affects the whole body. But a muscle can be very relaxed, in which case it's not working, in which case you're probably laying down or something like that. The ultimate relaxed position is similar to the position that we put people in first aid if they're laying down on your side with the legs tucked up a little bit and so on and so forth. It's one that's supposed to relax the maximum number of muscles. The relaxed muscle is one that isn't actually functioning at that time, or at least not functioning in a major way. Then there's the opposite end of that is a muscle that is under strain, under stress. If you drive a car, you'll know that sometimes you put your foot on the accelerator and realize you're in the wrong gear, because you can hear the engine sort of whining, or you can feel the engine sometimes. And then we want to apply the same kind of awareness to our bodies. Sometimes it's useful to put a muscle under that kind of strain if we're trying to target and build the strength and the endurance of particular muscles, but that's not something that we habitually do within Tai Chi. It might be something that you feel you need to do, but it's not the approach that we take in Tai Chi. And in between that, there's this sense of a muscle, and again, I would emphasize it's not just about muscles, but keeping it with that at the moment. There's a muscle that is working, well, in a sense, within its capacity. The equivalent in the car would be it's just sort of purring along, no sort of like discords. In terms of the muscles, it's clearly working, but it's also got some space, it's got some capacity for extra work, and that allows an elasticity, a springiness to develop through our body. We can't overlook the importance of conditioning in Tai Chi, but the way we would condition is through an awareness of our whole body. Again, unless we identified a particular thing that, oh, maybe you suddenly realize that bad leg 30 years ago has caused muscles to sort of adapt in a certain way. So you might, well, maybe I need to stretch out in a particular area or whatever. These are all useful things, but again, are directly involved in Tai Chi. We generate the awareness in Tai Chi, and then we might choose to do certain exercises in Tai Chi, or we might choose to move out of the strict Tai Chi syllabus and maybe kind of do I don't know, yoga stretching or something like that. There's all sorts of options out there. So that's a general sort of thing in the background the whole time, I think, when we do something like Tai Chi. So just with this exercise, a couple of variations, bouncing up and down. I don't know how well you can see this, but I'm just sort of bouncing. You see, I'm shaking slightly. Imagine you've got a duvet in that you're trying to put the cover on, and you're just sort of shaking it down like that. And at the same time, turning. The shaking movements are good for physically warming our bodies up, and also for just releasing some of the kind of tightness, some of the stiffness. And some people find that this exercise actually helps them with the rooting down, the dropping of our center of gravity, rather than having to sort of like sink their hips and stay there. They can bounce back up and gradually work with the things that are stopping the movement. And if you can do this comfortably and can multitask, as your arms swing round and your forearm strikes the top of your body, you just allow your elbow to loosen. So your hand swings up and you just direct your hands up and down. Towards your shoulder and then down again. I would recommend this as an early morning exercise to help you to wake up, to loosen up, just sort of gently start your system working for the day. And then still with that shaking movement, hands on your back. So just over the kidneys here, just above your hips. Palms of your hands, if that's comfortable, and gently pressing in. If this isn't a comfortable position for you, then you could just use one hand, or you could use the side of your hand or the back of your hand, if that's better for you. Any combination of that. If you're using one hand, then if you can, just swap over every now and then. And this will warm and stimulate the area of your lower back and your kidneys. And try not to stiffen up in your shoulders with this. Okay, let the hips drop down and raising your arms. This will help to open up chest and upper back a little bit with your arms up here. Depends how high your arms are. They shouldn't go any higher than shoulder height, and maybe quite low. If this is causing you to stiffen up, then drop them down. What you may want to do is to just move between those 2 points, and sometimes you can get a very soft, almost massaging feeling going up and down your back as you do this. And then letting your hands drop down. From this position, just begin to rock your weight forwards and backwards in your feet, keeping your toes on the floor, keeping your heels on the floor. Soften your knees. You can see my knees are slightly curved. That means my hips are dropping back. And you're pivoting from your ankle. You won't move very far. You'll only get to about the ball of each foot going forwards, the front part of the heel going back, before you have to find that the toes start to come off the ground, or you start to have to take a step forward, you lose balance. And just a reminder, if the pole represents my center line, then when I'm still, roughly speaking, I should be looking for that line to come out the crown of my head, and you go down to a point which would be in the middle of the foot rather than there, but just behind the ball of each foot. That's what we're aiming for. That means that in this position your hips would drop back, but when we're moving away from that center line a little bit. But really, the fixed point is in your foot. So as you do this, you will feel muscles in some part of your body, and it can vary, that are pulling a little bit more. Imagine a boat tied to a post in the sea. You know, your muscles are like the rope connecting the boat to the post, and the boat drifts around, and sometimes the rope will be really kind of like extended. We don't want to get to that point. This is where we start to bring about a certain amount of discernment in the feeling in the muscles here. My calf muscles, for instance, are clearly working. I can feel them engaged, but now they're gripping. This is a moment-to-moment awareness that we carry with us. It's not kind of, oh, right, that's okay. All of this stuff needs to be practiced so that it just becomes part of the background to our movements in the sessions, of course, when we're practicing Tai Chi. But also, this is one of the great benefits, I think, that comes out of Tai Chi, because that awareness just naturally spills over into the rest of our lives. And we find that we're no longer doing things when we go shopping, when we do the washing up, whatever, that are likely to cause us just minor injuries. It will still happen, but it will happen a lot less. Notice also the movement in between those two sort of parameters, front and back. The movement is quite smooth. And you may not feel that in your upper body, but bring your attention to the arch of your foot and just see if you can feel the movement, almost like the arch of your foot receiving a strong but soft massage. And that's a quality that we want to try and build on. Hands in front of you, not too far extend. Well, to start off with, have your elbows against your sides and imagine carrying a tray of drinks in your hand. The idea of that image is when we carry a tray of drinks and we walk across the room with the tray, we're moving, but in a way we're trying to keep the drinks tray still. Because if I do this all the time, then I know that I'm going to spill the drinks. And there's a distinct still quality about the arms when the body moves them correctly. So we don't keep our elbows on our sides, of course. So then eventually you imagine there's a table in front of you, you angle forward slightly, and then you just push out from your shoulders, feel the expansion between your arm and the side of your body, and pull back as though you're going to put the tray on the table. The other way, as though you just picked it up off the table. So these movements are taken from the rest of the body. The body pushes forwards, that helps to open out that angle. And so we start to get a sense for how the arms are moved by the body. So with this exercise, we're maintaining our alignment with the pull of gravity. I'm not going out here to stumble forwards. We're feeling a sense of starting to learn how we can move with that alignment, with that ability to yield to the pull of gravity. And we recognize there are certain factors involved in that. And then we bring our arms into the movement and learn how to get the movement, the flow, the energy going into our arms and hands. Because obviously the hands will express that movement. And even to the extent that as I go forwards, I have to hold my hand up here, I go forwards, the spaces between my fingers and the feeling in the palm of my hand just opens up and then back, and then opens up and back. And if those of you familiar with the movements, if you think about something like pushing away, we start off here, we go forwards, and at the end of the movement, the hand would just open. Not like that, not stiff and hard, just very, very gently. And this is another quality that that we start by. Turn your hands palm in. So now you're in a ball holding position. Notice where my thumbs are. So the position of the hand is this. See how the thumb is slightly curved in. It's very easy to hold the thumb out there. And that's, for some reason, tension seems to express itself through the thumb. We often find ourselves with stiff thumbs and indeed stiff fingers. So that can be quite difficult to maintain. And then this time, as you come forwards, just let your weight rest behind the balls of your feet, or wherever you find yourself in this sense of equilibrium. So if I exaggerate the process, I come forward, I stop going forwards when my weight is just behind the balls of my feet, and let the movement instead pull my hips down and then push it up. Focusing to begin with on the rooting down, as the name of the exercise is that. And that sense of being able to let your weight drop by allowing gravity to pull your hips back. And at the same time, trying to just release in lower back, hips, belly, so that rather than this happening, if my back's tight, you see how my bottom's sticking out now, that's eventually going to pull me back. And I'll probably compensate by doing something like that. So if you're getting strain in your back or your shoulders, check your hips and your pelvis first. When the muscles around that center part of my body are working and engaged, but not tight, the pelvis has the capacity to move. And so what happens is, as I sink down, this is exaggerated, but we might do something like this to compensate for the hips going back. But as the pelvis tucks under, everything comes back to the upright condition. The second thing to note after the sinking down is that at a certain point you get pushed back up. So the main energy for the upward movement is very dependent on rooting down. You can't, if I was to get a ball and say, okay, I'm going to bounce the ball and catch it, and then just very tentatively did that and stood like that, waiting for the ball to come up, you'd know that it wasn't going to come up. You'd wonder what I was doing. So we have to be prepared to just let go a little bit, to allow ourselves to drop. Being careful always of things like knees, hips. We want to make sure that they're softening, and some of that again is going to be conditioning the muscles in the legs. We don't want to say, for instance, lock our knees here or here, strain them, because it means the weight of the body will be going into our knees rather than through them. Changing to the wild goose, same movement in the hips, a little bit different in the upper part of the body, a little bit more expansive, and the expansion seeming to sort of broaden out, going up through our body towards our solar plexus. All of these things help to create a space within our body. An awareness of these things, focus our attention. So in this sense, Tai Chi embraces both ideas that we find in what's referred to as mindfulness practice, but also other forms of meditation concerned with what's sometimes referred to as concentration. And through those, our thoughts just quieten down. Other things that we might be concerned with don't go away, but they recede a little bit. We're no longer having to think about, you know, where we're going to go shopping, what we're doing later, what happened yesterday. So that spacious quality develops both mind and body. And within that space, the energy just naturally begins to flow. And then part in the clouds. The other thing to do with the meditational aspect of Tai Chi is that within that space, we're then able to focus what we call our intent in Tai Chi. So we can encourage particular movements. If you're familiar with, say, for instance, part in the clouds, you don't have to think about it particularly. It's a straightforward exercise, but you have some kind of image, some kind of memory, and your body just naturally flows into the shape created by that memory. So we start to be able to engage both mind and body in the movement, in the creation, and in the benefits that come out of the movement. And then changing to dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So the focus of our attention is on one side, on the expansion and the contraction. And then at the end of the movement, without rushing, our attention drifts across to the other side and we expand and contract. So the whole movement seems to happen within this spacious, quiet, peaceful area, for the benefit of both mind and body. You will find those thoughts intruding. As if you're going shopping, partly you may be trying to write the shopping list. This is quite normal. And when you realize that that's what you're doing, that you drifted off down some kind of storyline, then just acknowledge that. Don't think you somehow failed, and bring your attention back to the movement that you're doing. Again, a valuable process, this one. We can, in a sense, touch base through that process of switching our attention into our body, into our posture, into the exercise that we're doing. And that interruption of mental processes helps to break the chain of feelings and thoughts and things that are impinging on us and occupying our attention. Doesn't make them go away, nor is it to say that they're somehow going to sort of like just be miraculously solved if it's a problem we're trying to think of. Just that you're not having to think about it right now. And the flow of the energy to our body, in Chinese medicine, if you go to an acupuncturist or some kind of Chinese trained healer, the diagnosis will include an assessment of both physical, mental, and emotional states. And whatever prescription for treatment is developed will often take account of both of them. It depends what the problem is, of course. But because all lack of well-being would be associated with some kind of disruption in that internal flow of energy. So restoring that flow of energy and is something that needs to be understood, and we need to understand what's causing the disruption. Agitated thoughts can do that quite easily as poor posture. change into the exercise, pushing in 4 directions. Start with your hand beside your hips and then round in front of your body. This exercise, I think, illustrates that point very nicely. We push out, we expand out, and then we withdraw, but we don't just go straight into the next expansion. There's a very slight moment of, I've taken to describe as these punctuating moments. It's given us a slight rest, like a comma or a full stop in the sentence. That can help you with I think that's very, very common, which is that we tend to speed up, and we often with this one speed up on the return in movement. Very common to find ourselves trying to dash from one point to another. So we push out, and then rather than that slow, gentle drawing back, we kind of, oh, got to go here and there. So just remembering to settle there breaks that cycle for us. It can become a bit like running downhill if you're not careful. The faster we go, the faster we end up going. So like running downhill, if you can just stop yourself, the momentum won't build so much. Another useful thing that comes out of that focusing of our attention and the maintaining of that focus of our attention as far as we can is use of general images. So we're generally aware of the pull of gravity through our body and our posture. And we generally try and hold an image of something like moving through water. Water is a good medium to be thinking of because it provides the right kind of resistance and encourages a stronger but more flowing movement. And then changing to circling palms, expanding again on one side of your body, feeling the arm pushed out till it reaches your center line and then down. So more or less a half circle. Drawing your fingers back a little bit if you can, but don't strain in your wrist to do that. So as much as possible, the palm of your hand will face outwards. I'll show you here. And you may even find that some kind of image like sliding your hand up a wall or along the inside of an arch, means you just get a little bit of pressure outwards. That generally comes a bit later with this exercise. And if it's comfortable, just add in the turn. Be careful, feel what's happening down in your hips and your lower back with this one as well as in your shoulder. It can be quite a strong exercise in those areas. You don't want to pull your hips out of line. So if it's not comfortable, then leave it. Now switch to the other side. So some images that we use are consistent, they're part of the background, and eventually we can probably, for the most of the time, not have to bother with the actual image because it just becomes how we move. Others are more specific to particular exercises. It's always worth coming back and just doing a few minutes, reminding yourself that you're moving through water. However long you've been doing this, however much it's consistent. So if it's comfortable, add in the turn. the last time. I'm going to take the pole again. When we go into the next couple of exercises, it involves head and shoulders going forward, but it's not this, it's not leaning forward, because that will draw us over. It's the hips going back. I use the pole. You see my hips are going back bit behind the pole. It's this rotation and tilting in your pelvis that is doing that, rather than leaning. And that's one of the most significant things about these next two exercises. Sinking down, pushing up, rowing a boat in the middle of the lake, swinging over, letting your hips guide your arms, let your hips drop down to bring you back to the upright position and push up. So your hips, bottom should go fair way back, coming back to this position with buttocks, hips, lower back overhanging slightly. Very soft feeling in your lower back is what you're looking for, not a strain. Just moderate the movement until you can feel that. There is an element of stretching here, but it's what I would refer to as a soft stretch. I'm not going to a full stretch in this exercise. And then changing to polishing the table. This time you turn first before pushing your hip back, and then swing across to get your arms moving, your hands moving around in the circular pattern. Your hands were resting on a table here. Then as your hips go back, they'd be pushed forwards, vice versa. Shouldn't be feeling a stiffening, a straining in your back or your shoulders. If you are, moderate the movement, make it a small, smooth movement. It doesn't have to be a big movement. And it's quite often you may find that in doing this, you're no longer using the same muscles. So it can be quite interesting to play around with the range of movements. Small movements can be as illuminating, if not more so, than large movements. Move between the two. Come back up to the upright position and let your hips drop back. Remember to think of your hip bone more or less in line with your ankle bone, hip bones, I should say. Or you can think of, as I said before, buttocks, hips, lower back, sort of overhanging in the way that they might be if you were sitting on top of a fence. Soften your knees. Feel the effect on the muscles of your legs, especially the quadriceps, big muscles at the front of the legs, and just gently turn it again. And just let this movement ease any sort of sense of muscles knotting or tightening that may have developed, particularly in those last couple of exercises. Again, a soft massaging quality in the back. Shake out. Turn one foot out. This is an angle that you can play about with. Put the other foot forwards. As you get more used to this particular posture, your feet remain hip width apart. You've got the correct length of step, one that enables sort of gentle movement. As much as possible, you want to feel that your shoulders and your hips are facing forwards. Forwards is the direction given by your front foot. So you may find that you're slightly to one side or the other. And just think about this. Don't just randomly sort of twist your shoulders around or something like that. Any change must come in the center of the body. So one thing to think about is you tight around the center part of the body? Because if you are, then if you do turn, it's more likely to be in your upper body alone. And that would twist up your back and put a strain into your back. The other thing, and I come closer so you can see, is your knees not twisted inwards. And the back knee is quite likely to do that. I'm not standing straight. Yeah. So if it, I don't want my back knee to collapse in like this. So if you're standing like this, slightly offline, and you turn and it does that to your knee, then that's not a useful thing. And two things really. One is, if you can't make the corrections that I'm offering, then don't try and fake it. It's not the end of the world to start off with if you're slightly offline. But if you can do, then I've already talked about moving from the hips. The remedy for the knee, which is just rotate the knee out a little bit, that movement. And so what we end up with is a posture where we feel a slight stretch on the inside of the leg. We feel the muscles on the outer edge of the legs working, because they're working to maintain the alignment of the leg, the direction that the knee's pointing in, and it's all happening at the same time. You may need to practice that rotating the knee out separately, but eventually it's all part of the same movement. But I would emphasize that that's a long-term prospect, and it's another aspect of body conditioning. Then when you go back, you raise your toes, and again, you can now turn your front foot out a little bit, and then let your back knee come in, and that will raise your back heel. Because the front foot's turned out one way and your back foot's turned out the other way, now you may well find, I'm going to exaggerate, see how my body's turning. This is way too far, it's quite a small movement. But what that actually does is it helps to move the foot. It's like I get to here, I turn, and that affects my toes. So it may not be visible. It doesn't look as though it's actually visible on mine, but I can feel a slight kind of settling in, and you can see that's when my heel comes up. I go back here and I settle in, and my toes come up a little bit more. And then eventually that also helps to bring the foot in. Those of you who've done something like the 24-step form will be familiar with turning the foot out in movements like part of the wild horse's mane. That's further, the foot is generally turned further out than we're turning it here. And part of the reason for doing that is to aid the next step, is to provide the continuity really into the next step. And then on the other side, when we're talking about angles of the feet and indeed the upper body, remember that hips are going to be a key factor here. We're not all going to have the same angle. So this brings us back to an awareness that we try to generate right from the beginning, this awareness of how it feels when our body is in line. What's the quality of the movement? How does it feel within your body? Do you have that sense of spaciousness? Do you have that sense of muscles working but not gripping? And if you haven't, then it's an indication that you need to think about your posture. And it might be that maybe if your knee keeps going out of line, maybe changing that back angle is important. When it comes to that sort of level, it's a very individual thing based on our ability to continue listening to our body. Raising your toes and your hips. We're using your legs to propel your body. Try not to lean forwards with your shoulders or your head. And we're not using our arms, normal walking, we would gain a bit of momentum with our arms. This is really all about the legs to begin with. Bringing your foot in. That transfer of the weight is primary force, or one of the primary forces that drives the movements. I sometimes compare transferring the weight to pushing the pedals down on a bicycle. And now just take a few steps through. Notice how my foot comes into the center each time. Remember, I pointed out a similar sort of flow, similar process when we did pushing in 4 directions. It's as though every movement that we do, one way or another, with arms or with legs, flows into the center and then expands out. Changing direction. Good, and then shake out. So the walk-in is a very easy movement to remember. It's not complicated. But it's not just walking. We're walking with a particular awareness. Again, there's a quality in this that we could describe as mindfulness. But if this were purely mindful walking, we would want to be aware of the step and the foot going down, but we're not too bothered about where we're taking the step, how we're taking the step. As long as we're comfortable, that's fine. As long as we're aware, that's fine. In Tai Chi, we take that a little bit further. We want to make sure the foot goes down in the right place. We want to make sure the heel goes down before the toes, that we maintain that alignment with the pull of gravity. So just ask him a little bit more. Things like this, the things that I've been talking about, really become part of the background for Tai Chi. And we want them to become as familiar to us as tying your shoelaces is. We don't walk along the road checking our shoelaces all the time. It would be, oh yeah, still down. That would be absurd. But we know when they come undone. So we start to recognize when we've lost the route, when we've lost that spaciousness, when there's an agitation, either physical or whatever, and we train ourselves in what is fundamentally a very simple but very difficult response, which is that thing about coming back into the center for a moment as our first response. There may well be other responses after that, of course, but our first response is about coming back. So have your right foot forwards, sinking back, hands on your belly. Push forwards, that movement, push your arms forwards and out, chest open just a little bit, and sinking back. Pigeon spreads its wings. Like a wave building from your back foot, coming out through the front of your body, and draining down through your front foot. And then similarly going back, this time coming out through your back and then down into your back foot. Top of your arm, rotating in the shoulder joint. Shoulder joint just resting on your ribs, back. One more time. And then let your hands drop down. This time your hands are following the movement most of the time. You go forwards, you settle in your front leg, and then your arms swing through. This fisherman cast a net. Try not to force your hands into a position, but rather just feel that movement flowing into them from your back leg. See how far that moves. One more time. And then push and wave. This time, your hands in front of you. And once again, that movement from the back leg, pushing your arms out, and then just curve up gently and then get drawn back. All of these movements that we've just done, we maintain that forward-looking position. Again, there may be a little bit of rotation turning in the center of your body, but it's nothing significant. It may affect the arms, well, it will affect the arms a little, but again, nothing should be forced. But this time, when you go back, leave your right hand, the front hand as it were, behind, go back, drawing your left hand in and make a particular turn so that that swings your arm out and up. Turn the front hand palm up, move forwards, turn, and let that movement move your arm. Back hand swings up to your shoulder, front hand rotates palm up, and you sink back. This is repulsing the monkey. You could imagine that there's a piece of string from one hand going around your back to the other hand. So as one hand is pushed forward, it automatically draws your hand back. You could get the same impression just by being aware of the connection between your arms across your shoulders, and perhaps even better, across your hips. Lovely. And shake out. So repulse the monkey. Left foot forward. Same 4 exercises, starting with pigeon spreads its wings. Nice and gently. Remember that image of moving through water. That could be your hips dropping, overhanging. Soften your knees. Changing now to fisherman cast the net. And then pushing wave. And repulse the monkey. This time, turn your front foot out a little bit when you're on the back foot, go forwards, and rather than going back now, Just raise your back foot, bring it in as you position your hands, and then go forwards. Raise your back heel as your body turns, bring your foot in, right hand by your shoulder, left hand out in front, step, turn, and get that push-pull movement with the hand. A simplified version of movements that come in, a lot of the Tai Chi forms. To go back, keep fixed step for the moment, going back, and now as you go back and turn, raise your front toes, bring your foot in, step, and only when the foot is down, of course, move. So moving carefully, position the foot, hip width, far enough back, make sure the ground underneath you is firm, and then move. Shake out. Lovely. Open your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, arm, side. Push your back. And around your hips. Legs. Light on your belly. Up the part of your chest. And at the end of the session, as always, step back and repulse the monkey, just bringing our attention back to these really basic things of postures, so that what we're left with at the end of the class is this very strong impression of what we call central equilibrium in Tai Chi. So sinking down, pushing up, moving your arms around as though you're holding the ball against your chest, drawing in and settle. One more time. And stand. Shake that. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. As always, that seems to go so very quickly.